viewer requested I tell the story of my spiritual journey. So for the past 3 days on this channel, I've covered my deeply confused childhood, my battle with chronic pain, my hundreds of hours studying one-to-one with a monk, and how I saved my mother's life following her suicide attempt. I'll drop links to those previous parts in the description. Yesterday, or the day before, I finished right before I met my wife, who, as a qualified neuropsychologist, was the final piece of the puzzle regarding my finally becoming ready to teach the Dharma publicly. Earlier in my story, I shared how I'd struggled with deep fear of intimacy. Though I had a girlfriend through most of my 20s, I still held some limiting beliefs in that area. When she and I broke up, I started to investigate the root of my issues. I remember a vivid experience of visiting my inner child in meditation. I appeared next to him on the infant school playground and saw him watching the other kids pairing up, pretending to be boyfriend and girlfriend, no doubt imitating the adults in their lives. As I covered in my previous video, I never saw any of the adults in my life being affectionate to one another. So I felt like an outsider. I decided, feeling little Dan's confusion as my own, that we were going to shine the light of new wisdom on it. I took him by the hand and led him over to a bench on the other side of the playground. I sat him on my lap and said, "You know, Danny, it's okay that you don't understand what the other kids are doing right now. You're going to figure it all out by the time you're grown up. And you're going to play drums in a band and get plenty of girls chasing after you. But you know the best part? You're not even going to feel like you need them. You're eventually going to feel so good about yourself that you don't need anything from anyone. And that's going to make the girls want you so much more." Little Dan smiled at me. Then I hugged him so tight that he felt completely safe for the first time ever. The vision dissolved, and I noticed the most peaceful grin stretching across my face as I came back into my body. Also, my heart felt as light as a feather and as expansive as the sky. A weight I'd been carrying for almost 30 years had vanished, leaving no trace. 2 weeks later, I met my wife. She is a perfect match for me in every way. But most important to this story is how she and I immediately got to comparing notes from our individual journeys. She'd been studying psychology as deeply as I'd been studying the Dharma. We refined away everything in my teaching that didn't withstand her academic scrutiny. Note that she was open-minded. It wasn't that we were trying to create something that would belong in a classroom, but that refinement was key. Now, 2 other teachers I must mention for my story to be complete are Tempa Dukta Lama, from whom I received Dzogchen transmission, and Artem Boitsov, who helped me remove the last remaining traces of cultural baggage from my teaching. with this fusion of understandings and practices finally coming together into something reconciled and complete, I spent a year in relative silence. I wouldn't quite call it a retreat in the traditional sense, but it was about as close as one will ever get living in Western civilization. The 3 UK COVID lockdowns gave me the perfect opportunity to take the deep rest I was due, that all of us are due, once we finally come home and realize our true nature. Everything had become tremendously easeful. The mental processes with which I'd terrorized myself for 30 years were finally cut through at the root. And the magical quality of each moment arising just as it is, without interpretation, judgment, or description, was something I knew I could have enjoyed for the rest of my life, without ever doing much of anything ever again. Toward the end of that year, I was on a call with a dear Dharma friend with whom I actually lost touch. If you're out there, Chris Kerr, I'd love to hear from you, brother. Chris and I spoke semi-regularly, but this time he made a particular encouragement that would begin another profound change in the course of my life. We were discussing the question of whether I would indeed bother to do anything ever again, when Chris said, "Why don't you just put what you say to me on the internet for everyone else?" I'd considered publishing content in the past, but never quite like that. I immediately made a note on my phone of a list of topics which ended up as long as my arm. So then I started out uploading talks to an app called Insight Timer, where I was featured a handful of times by their editorial team. And to this day, I still receive heartwarming comments on the 80 or so talks that still live on the platform. I responded to every one of those comments to begin with, but I was disheartened when I realized that the platform demanded all conversations end there. There was no way to have ongoing discussions with my listeners. It was one comment from them, one response from me. Nor was there any way to direct them elsewhere so that we might talk further, and that was no good. So I started looking for alternative platforms. And long story short, I spent the following 2.5 years building an audience of 30,000 followers on Twitter, which laid the foundation for a successful business. I began teaching spirituality alone, but then quickly ended up teaching others to set up and run a business like mine too. Now, I can't move past this moment in my story without addressing the hot topic of money and spiritual teaching. Many people feel very strongly that spiritual teaching should be given for free, not least of all that first teacher of mine, Dear Dhammarato, good Theravadin that he is. And to begin with, I agreed with him. I spent 2 years uploading tracks on Insight Timer, where teachers are paid per stream, just like Spotify pays musical artists. I also gave listeners the opportunity to make donations. Having given that a fair shot, I ran some numbers and discovered that I'd have needed 3 million unique plays per month to pay my rent. I can't imagine that even the most famous teachers on that platform are reaching those numbers. So once the lockdowns ended, I went back to teaching music full-time, I was picking up some Dharma students on the side as well. And that meant I started to have a particular kind of experience more and more often. If you've ever been friends with a music teacher, you'll know that most students they see aren't serious. Many of mine wouldn't touch their drums between one lesson and the next, and so I gave a lot of the same lessons to the same students over and over again. I was used to this, but now I'd often feel my phone buzzing in my pocket during those lessons. And it was a Dharma student on the other end who wanted desperately to get my take on some insight they'd had during a meditation, or who was in the midst of a breakup with their partner, or having a panic attack, or they were worried about something they'd just read in an ancient text. But I couldn't answer because I'd sold my time to my music student. Any good spiritual teacher living in the modern world, unless they have a trust fund, is going to be faced with this same predicament. After this went on long enough, it became clear to me that there was more benefit to be found in starting a business as a spiritual teacher, controversial as that may be, than there was benefit in continuing my old career. To state the obvious, things are very different now to how they were in the time of the Buddha. Everyone in modern culture, Western culture at least, but increasingly Eastern culture too, everyone grew up paying set fees for a service. They understand this. But with donations, people get confused. They don't know when to donate, nor do they know how much to donate. So mostly, they don't donate. The idea that the service of transmitting the Dharma must be placed in a special category where its teachers are homeless, in a culture where this isn't supported, is simply out of touch. If you yourself are in the position to teach Dharma now or in the future, please don't listen to anyone who says you must teach for free. This is a rule, and it had its time. It certainly worked in the time of the Buddha, but that time is over. You will do much greater benefit to the world if you enable yourself to put out free content on a full-time basis, like I do, and charge a reasonable fee to those who want personal guidance, like I do. Once I'd learned the basics of online one-person business, I was able to close my music business for good, and I never looked back. Since then, I've helped people get over OCD, I've helped them get over insomnia, anxiety, self-hatred, difficult relationships, procrastination, addiction, depression, suicidal ideation, imposter syndrome, creative blocks, apathy, purposelessness, and a whole host of obstacles specific to their spiritual practice as well. I've watched students burst into fits of laughter as they realize decisively the empty nature of the afflictive states that used to feel so real to them. I receive comments all the time thanking me for simplifying the complex spiritual landscape we find ourselves in as 21st century practitioners. And I'm able to do this because of everything I went through myself, which led me to finally ditch all my emotional baggage, see things as they really are, and commit to a simple life that accommodates the expression of natural compassion that fuels this outreach. you can join me and my wife and my successful students in this heaven realm, friend. It is possible, and helping you to get there is why I'm here. If you want to know where you're at in that journey right now, take my 1-minute quiz. There's a link in the description as always. Drop me a comment. Let me know if you made it through all 4 parts of my story, and maybe tell me something of your own. Or of course, share your reflections or further questions about my own story. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this series, if you enjoyed this video, do all the stuff that tells YouTube you want to see more from me. I upload almost every single day. Had a slight technical error yesterday. We'll never be beyond those, but we minimize them, we keep simplifying, and we hope to see you back here tomorrow and every single day after that.